Okay, let's go. Number 1. Presolar silicon carbide grains. You are in a clean room at the Field Museum of Natural History in Chicago. The year is 2020. A researcher named Philip Heck slides a fragment of ancient rock under an ion probe. The fragment came from a meteorite that fell in rural Australia in 1969. He is measuring isotope ratios in a single silicon carbide grain smaller than a human red blood cell. The data returns. He checks it twice. The grain is 7.5 billion years old. The Sun is 4.6 billion years old. This grain existed for 3 billion years before our solar system began. On September 28, 1969, a fireball tore apart over the town of Murchison in Victoria, Australia. Fragments scattered across farmland. One piece smashed through a barn roof. Within days, researchers from around the world were converging on the site. The Murchison meteorite is a carbonaceous chondrite, one of the most chemically primitive rock types in the solar system, a class that has remained essentially unaltered since before Earth formed. Scientists have been extracting secrets from it ever since. Among the most startling are presolar grains. These are microscopic crystals of silicon carbide, graphite, and corundum that formed inside the atmospheres of dying stars long before our own star ignited. They survived the gravitational collapse of the solar nebula, the violent formation of the planets, 4.6 billion years in interstellar space, and atmospheric entry at 40,000 miles per hour. They arrived intact. Philip Heck and colleagues at the Field Museum, the University of Chicago, and ETH Zurich published their findings in 2020 in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences. Their method used the accumulation of neon-21, produced by cosmic ray exposure, to date individual grains directly. The oldest grain measured 7.5 billion years. The stellar population analysis found that most grains formed between 4.6 and 4.9 billion years before the present. With a noticeable burst, the team interpreted as evidence of elevated star formation in the Milky Way during that era. The carbon, nitrogen, and silicon isotope compositions in these grains are diagnostic. They match the theoretical signatures of asymptotic giant branch stars, massive aging stars that expand to hundreds of times the Sun's size and shed their outer layers in slow stellar winds over millions of years. The ratios are so unlike anything that forms inside our solar system that contamination from local solar material is ruled out, definitively. Mainstream astrophysicists describe presolar grains as stardust, and the explanation is mechanistically clean. When a star dies, it expels material in winds and explosions. That material drifts through the galaxy and eventually gets swept into molecular clouds. Our molecular cloud was laced with grains from many prior stellar generations. Most were destroyed in the violent heat of the early solar system when temperatures were high enough to vaporize rock. A small fraction survived inside the primitive asteroids that formed from unheated material. Finding them is like finding the original ingredients still sitting intact inside the final product. But survival on that scale is not supposed to be possible. These grains drifted through interstellar space for billions of years. They endured the shock wave of a supernova close enough to trigger our solar system's gravitational collapse. They survived temperatures that melt most minerals. And they did this while remaining chemically identifiable, their isotopic ratios still pointing unambiguously to the specific type of star that made them. The grain Heck dated at 7.5 billion years was already 3 billion years old when the solar system formed. It predates Earth by almost as much as Earth itself predates now. If silicon carbide grains from red giant stars can survive all of that and fall intact on an Australian farm, what else made the journey? What else is locked inside the oldest rocks in our solar system, still carrying the chemistry of worlds we will never find? How many of them are there, and what are they carrying? From the smallest physical grains of alien origin, we turn to molecules that carry an even more loaded question, the question of life itself. Number 2. Amino acids. It is September 28, 1969, 10:58 in the morning. Residents of Murchison, Victoria, look up as a fireball streaks across the sky and breaks into pieces. One fragment crashes through a barn roof, another lands in a clay road. The air smells like methylated spirits. Within 72 hours, researchers from NASA and Stanford are converging on this small Australian town. They do not know it yet, but what fell from the sky contains an ingredient list for life, assembled somewhere in the void between stars. The Murchison meteorite belongs to the CM class of carbonaceous chondrites, among the least chemically altered rocks in the solar system. It contains water-bearing clay minerals and a dense fraction of organic compounds preserved since before Earth existed. In 1970, Cyril Panamparuma at the NASA Ames Research Center and Keith Kvenvolden at Stanford University published analyses identifying amino acids in the meteorite. Their critical test was chirality. On Earth, biology uses only left-handed amino acid molecules. The Murchison samples contained roughly equal proportions of left-handed and right-handed forms. An equal mixture is the signature of abiotic, non-terrestrial chemistry. Contamination from Earth sources was ruled out. The amino acids were extraterrestrial. Over the following decades, as instruments improved, researchers identified 96 distinct amino acids in Murchison. Life on Earth uses only 20 to build every protein in every organism that has ever lived. The meteorite contained 76 more that biology never incorporated, alongside the ones it does use: glycine, alanine, glutamic acid, proline, all there, waiting. In 2010, Philipp Schmidt-Kaplan and colleagues at the Helmholtz Center Munich ran Murchison's soluble organic fraction through a Fourier transform ion cyclotron resonance mass spectrometer, an instrument capable of resolving molecular masses to fractions of a proton mass. More than 14,000 distinct molecular compositions emerged from a single meteorite's organic fraction. The deuterium to hydrogen ratios and carbon isotope signatures in these organics match the conditions of cold interstellar molecular clouds, not warm planetary or solar environments. These molecules did not form inside the asteroid. They arrived in it, already assembled, from the space between star systems. In 2023, analysis of samples returned by the Hayabusa 2 spacecraft from asteroid Ryugu, collected without Earth atmosphere exposure, confirmed amino acids in a contamination-free context, with isotopic ratios consistent with interstellar molecular cloud formation. The standard astrophysical explanation is that this is exactly what the interstellar medium produces. Ultraviolet radiation from nearby stars hits ice-coated dust grains in molecular clouds and drives radical chemistry. Carbon atoms chain together. Amino acids are synthesized from simple starting materials: water, ammonia, methanol, carbon dioxide. These reactions have been reproduced in laboratories. When molecular clouds collapse into solar systems, the organics they contain are incorporated into forming asteroids and eventually delivered wherever those asteroids land. What the explanation does not close is the question of selection. Life uses exactly 20 amino acids out of the 96 in Murchison. Those 20 are not random. They constitute the complete protein vocabulary of every organism on this planet. Did those 20 get selected here, through some biochemical filter we still cannot fully identify? Or did they arrive pre-selected, with a bias toward the most functionally versatile molecules already encoded in interstellar chemistry? Some researchers point to a faint excess of left-handed amino acids in certain Murchison samples, possibly caused by circularly polarized ultraviolet radiation near a neutron star. If that left-hand preference influenced what assembled on early Earth, life's own chirality was not decided on this planet. It was decided in the interstellar medium, by physics. Before Earth existed, the Murchison meteorite does not tell us how life started. It tells us that life's ingredients were ready and waiting long before there was anywhere for life to start. That is either a coincidence or a clue. No one has settled which. From molecules that build proteins, we descend into something older and stranger, the radioactive ghost of a star that exploded before our sun ever ignited. Number 3. Xenon 129. The year is 1960. John Reynolds, a physicist at the University of California, Berkeley, sits at a mass spectrometer in a room that smells of vacuum grease and machine oil. He is measuring noble gas ratios inside a meteorite called Richardson, a carbonaceous chondrite found in North Dakota. He is comparing isotope abundances of xenon, one of the heaviest noble gases. One isotope, Xenon 129, is present in systematic excess, not slightly. A large, unmistakable, repeatable excess. Reynolds performs the calculation backward. Xenon 129 is the decay product of iodine 129. Iodine 129 has a half-life of 15.7 million years. It is produced only in supernova explosions. The iodine that produced this xenon was synthesized in a stellar explosion approximately 100 million years before our solar system formed. Reynolds published in Physical Review Letters in 1960. The academic community spent the next 2 decades arguing about whether he was right. He was. The iodine-xenon anomaly has since been confirmed in dozens of meteorite classes, using instruments far more precise than anything Reynolds had in 1960. Frank Podosek and colleagues at Washington University in St. Louis refined the timeline through the 1980s and 1990s. The iodine-129 was synthesized in a supernova explosion approximately 100 to 150 million years before the formation of our solar system's first solid objects. The constraint is unforgiving. Iodine-129 decays to undetectable levels within roughly 150 million years. The measurable excess xenon-129 in meteorites means the iodine-129 that produced it was still present when the solar system's first minerals crystallized. The solar system formed quickly enough after the supernova's material reached our molecular cloud that the iodine hadn't finished decaying. That xenon-129 is now preserved as trapped gas inside microscopic sites in the meteorite's crystal lattice, where it has sat undisturbed for over 4 billion years. The mainstream interpretation holds that this is what astrophysics predicts. Stars synthesize heavy elements, die, and seed the interstellar medium. Our molecular cloud, like all molecular clouds, was a chemical inheritance from previous stellar generations. Short-lived radioactive nuclides, including iodine-129, were part of the package. When the cloud collapsed into our solar system, those isotopes were incorporated into the earliest forming solids. Their decay products are now locked in meteorites as a record of the cloud's composition at the moment of formation. Standard, expected, predictable, but the timing is harder to absorb. The window between when the supernova injected iodine-129 into our molecular cloud and when the solar system's first solids formed, calculated from the decay math, is on the order of 1 to 2 million years. 1 to 2 million years is an eye blink in astronomical time. That window is not long enough for the cloud to casually absorb supernova material and then happen to collapse later. It is exactly the timescale for a supernova shockwave to compress a nearby molecular cloud and trigger its gravitational collapse. This is now a mainstream hypothesis in stellar science. The supernova that seeded our cloud with iodine-129 may be the same event that caused our solar system to exist. A dying star did not just contaminate the material we are built from. It may have caused the collapse that produced us. The xenon-129 sealed inside ancient meteorites is more than an isotopic anomaly. It is a fingerprint left at a birth. The star that exploded, whose shock wave compressed the cloud and started the clock on our solar system, left its nuclear signature in the rocks that formed from that collapse. When Reynolds measured xenon in a North Dakota meteorite in 1960, he was reading a record of an event that happened before Earth existed. Before the sun existed, the message was waiting in the rock the whole time. From the radioactive echo of a stellar explosion, we descend into something even more compressed. Tiny diamonds formed inside planets that have been dead for billions of years. Number 4. Nanodiamonds. The diamonds are too small to see, not with the naked eye and not with an ordinary microscope. Each one measures roughly 2 to 3 nanometers in diameter, about a millionth of an inch across. There are billions of them per gram of certain meteorites, hundreds of trillions per gram of some samples. And when researchers measure their isotopic compositions, the data points unambiguously to stellar nucleosynthesis occurring in supernovae and dying giant stars. These diamonds did not form in our solar system. They formed inside other stars, were carried outward in stellar winds, drifted through interstellar space for billions of years, and arrived inside asteroids that eventually fell to Earth. The most ordinary-seeming material in the universe. The most well-traveled. Edward Anders and colleagues at the University of Chicago isolated nanodiamond grains from meteorites in 1987 in a paper published in Science. Their method was blunt. Dissolve the host rock entirely in a mixture of hydrofluoric and hydrochloric acid. Diamonds do not dissolve. What remained after the acid treatment were billions of diamond grains, each 2 to 3 nanometers across. Their concentration ranged from roughly 400 to 1,000 parts per million depending on the sample, making nanodiamonds the most abundant presolar mineral by mass in primitive meteorites. The isotopic signature confirmed the origin. A subset of these nanodiamonds contains trapped xenon in a pattern called xenon HL, in which both the lightest and the heaviest xenon isotopes are simultaneously enhanced. That pattern is produced by rapid neutron capture during supernova explosions. It cannot be generated by any process operating inside our solar system. These diamonds formed in, or were irradiated by, stellar explosions. Thomas Bernatowicz at Washington University and Sachiko Amari at the Enrico Fermi Institute at the University of Chicago carried the analysis further. The nitrogen isotope ratios in many nanodiamond populations point specifically to formation in asymptotic giant branch stars, the same dying giant stars from which the silicon carbide grains in item 1 originated. These stars expand to hundreds of times the Sun's size. Then they shed their outer layers in slow winds over millions of years. Inside those outflowing winds, at temperatures around 1,800 degrees Fahrenheit, carbon bonds to carbon in the simplest stable lattice structure possible. The diamond crystal, built atom by atom, grain by grain, over enormous timescales. The grains drift outward into interstellar space, travel for billions of years, get swept into new molecular clouds, end up inside asteroids formed in what will become our solar system. The mainstream classification places nanodiamonds within the established presolar grain category. The chemistry is understood. The formation environments are modeled. Synthetic nanodiamonds can be produced in laboratories using detonation methods that approximate stellar outflow conditions. There is no required mystery. But the arithmetic of presence is hard to pass over lightly. Every gram of the Murchison meteorite contains hundreds of trillions of individual nanodiamond grains. Hundreds of trillions. Each one is a physical artifact of stellar chemistry from another star system. Each one predates the Earth. Every piece of terrestrial rock you have ever touched has been melted and reformed multiple times through plate tectonics, volcanism, erosion. It remembers nothing older than Earth itself. The nanodiamonds in primitive meteorites remember a time before the Sun. They are the direct material inheritance of star systems we cannot visit, preserved intact inside rocks that have not been significantly altered since before our solar system's first planet solidified. You can hold a gram of the Murchison meteorite in your hand. Inside it are hundreds of trillions of diamonds from other worlds. None of them can be seen. All of them can be measured. They're still there. The nanodiamonds are silent. But the carbon structures in the next discovery are not silent at all. They are full of gas from dead stars, sealed at the moment of those stars' deaths, still waiting to be opened. Number 5. Buckminster Fullerene C60. In 1985, Harold Kroto, at the University of Sussex, and Robert Curl, and Richard Smalley, at Rice University, discovered a molecule that no one had predicted. They had vaporized graphite with a laser and found that under certain conditions, 60 carbon atoms spontaneously assembled into a stable spherical structure built entirely of pentagons and hexagons, a perfect geodesic sphere at molecular scale. They named it Buckminster Fullerene, after the architect Buckminster Fuller, who designed geodesic domes using the same geometric logic. All three received the Nobel Prize in Chemistry in 1996. The molecule was a curiosity. An elegant laboratory creation. Nobody expected to find it in a rock from space, and nobody expected that the rock-bound version would be full of gas from the atmosphere of a star that burned out before Earth existed. In 2000, Luann Becker, at the University of Hawaii, published in Earth and Planetary Science Letters, reporting the discovery of fullerenes, specifically C60 and the slightly larger C70, inside the Allende meteorite. The carbon cages were not the finding. The contents were. When Becker's team analyzed the noble gases trapped inside the Fullerene lattice, they found helium-3 and helium-4 in ratios completely unlike those found in Earth's atmosphere, in any terrestrial geological source, or in any known planetary material. Helium-3, the lighter isotope of helium, is produced primarily in stellar nucleosynthesis inside stars and in cosmic ray spallation in interstellar space. The ratio of helium-3 to helium-4 inside these carbon cages match stellar outflow and presolar origin, not anything from our solar system. The gas inside the cage was from a dying star's atmosphere, sealed at the moment the Fullerene assembled around it. The formation pathway is understood. Carbon-rich stars ejecting material in winds and shells create outflowing gas that cools rapidly as it expands. The conditions in those outflows, the right carbon-to-oxygen ratio, the right temperature gradient, the right radiation field, are conducive to Fullerene formation. As the cage assembles, it seals a pocket of stellar gas inside a structure that is geometrically among the most stable molecular arrangements in nature. The cage drifts into interstellar space, travels for hundreds of millions or billions of years as part of the stellar outflow, gets incorporated into a forming asteroid. Once inside the cold asteroid matrix, the noble gas inside has nowhere to go. The cage holds. Releasing the gas requires temperatures far beyond anything present in a cold, unheated asteroid. The helium from that dead star's atmosphere is still inside. This is not a fringe interpretation. The Spitzer Space Telescope detected C60 in multiple planetary nebulae in 2010. Fullerenes have been found in interstellar gas absorption spectra and in reflection nebulae. They are a routine product of high-temperature carbon chemistry in stellar environments. Their presence in carbonaceous chondrites is consistent with a well-established picture of the interstellar medium, delivering complex carbon chemistry to forming solar systems. Routine doesn't make it ordinary. A soccer ball made of 60 carbon atoms forms in the outflow of a dying star. It seals a pocket of that star's atmosphere inside its lattice. It drifts through interstellar space for 2 billion years. It gets incorporated into an asteroid during our solar system's formation. The asteroid falls in Mexico. A researcher dissolves the surrounding rock. The cage is isolated. The gas inside is still there. It is gas from a star that burned out before Earth existed, preserved in a carbon cage through the entire history of our solar system, still readable, still measurable, still pointing back to the star that made it. The same molecular architecture that 3 chemists discovered in a Houston lab in 1985 had been building itself in stellar outflows for longer than Earth has existed. The Nobel Prize went to the discoverers. The architects were the stars. From the geometry of carbon cages, we move to a wider chemical vocabulary. The complex organic molecules filling the space between stars, locked into asteroids and delivered wholesale to worlds like ours. Number 6. Polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons. In 2010, a team led by Philipp Schmidt-Kopplin at the Helmholtz Center Munich ran the Murchison meteorite soluble organic fraction through a Fourier transform ion cyclotron resonance mass spectrometer. The instrument resolves molecular masses to within a fraction of a proton's mass. The output, more than 14,000 distinct molecular compositions from a single rock. 14,000. Some were simple 2-carbon organic acids. Others were polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons, large ring-structured carbon molecules now understood to be among the most abundant organic compounds in the galaxy, forming wherever carbon chemistry has enough time and energy to run. These molecules did not form in the asteroid. Their deuterium to hydrogen ratios match cold interstellar molecular clouds, not warm planetary environments. They arrived in the asteroid already assembled, from the space between star systems. Polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons, or PAHs, consist of multiple fused benzene rings. Naphthalene, the simplest, has 2 rings and is what mothballs smell like. The meteorite PAHs include molecules with 3, 4, 5, and more rings, reaching structural complexity that requires extended reaction time and specific thermal conditions to build. Their carbon isotope ratios in meteorite samples differ systematically from any terrestrial source. The signatures match interstellar molecular cloud chemistry. Radio telescopes have identified more than 200 distinct organic molecules in interstellar clouds, and PAHs are estimated to account for 10 to 15% of all the carbon in the galaxy. They are not exotic. They are one of the dominant chemical products of the universe. When a molecular cloud collapses into a solar system, the PAHs it contains get incorporated into primitive asteroids and preserved. The Tagish Lake meteorite fell onto a frozen lake in British Columbia in January 2000. Witnesses saw the fireball. Locals collected fragments within days and stored them on ice, minimizing contamination. Tagish Lake proved to be one of the most pristine carbonaceous chondrites ever recovered. Its organic content was even richer in carbon-bearing macromolecular compounds than Murchison. when Hayabusa 2 returned samples from Ryugu in 2020, and researchers published analyses in 2022, the organic inventory confirmed again, without terrestrial contamination, that primitive asteroids carry interstellar organic chemistry as a fundamental part of their composition. The mainstream conclusion is that asteroids are storage vessels for interstellar organic material, and their delivery to planetary surfaces is a natural part of planet formation. The chemistry is interesting. The delivery mechanism is understood, not mysterious. The early Earth, during the late heavy bombardment, between 4 billion and 3.8 billion years ago, received enormous quantities of asteroid material. Estimates of the total organic carbon delivered to early Earth via carbonaceous chondrites range from tens of millions to hundreds of billions of tons. That is not trace contamination. That is an organic chemistry starter kit delivered to an entire planet. Whether life needed that delivery or would have built its own organics from scratch is genuinely unresolved. Both are chemically plausible. What is not plausible is treating the delivery as incidental. 14,000 molecular species in one rock from interstellar space. If one meteorite carries that much, and billions of tons of that material fell on early Earth over hundreds of millions of years, then the molecular diversity that arrived on this planet from space was staggering in scale. The meteorites did not wait for the debate to settle. They fell, they dissolved in early water, and they handed over their cargo to whatever chemistry was already here. Whether life used it or not, the inventory was delivered. From interstellar organic chemistry preserved in stone, we turn to something that looks not just chemical, but biological. Number 7. Magnetite framboids. Under an electron microscope, the object looks like a raspberry. Dozens of tiny magnetite cubes, each 50 to 100 nanometers across, arranged in a flexible chain, uniformly sized, perfectly spaced. The chain bends without breaking. On Earth today, structures like this are produced by one class of organisms, magnetotactic bacteria. These microbes synthesize internal chains of nanoscale magnetite crystals and use them to orient along Earth's magnetic field lines, navigating chemical gradients in sediment and water. The size and morphology of these crystals are so distinctive that astrobiologists have proposed them as a universal biosignature, a structural signal of life recognizable without DNA analysis, without biochemistry, without anything except an electron microscope and a scale bar. The raspberry-shaped structure you are looking at did not come from any living organism. It came from a carbonaceous chondrite, a rock fragment from an asteroid that has never touched Earth's biosphere. Nobody has definitively explained why it looks the way it does. Magnetite is iron oxide, one of the most common minerals on Earth and in meteorites. It forms through many abiotic geological processes. But the specific form called biogenic magnetite, nanoscale crystals of uniform size in organized chains, has been considered a reliable indicator of biological activity, precisely because the degree of size control and spatial organization exceeds what spontaneous abiotic crystallization typically produces. In 1996, David McKay and colleagues at NASA's Johnson Space Center published in Science, arguing that ALH 84001, a meteorite from Mars, contained possible evidence of past Martian microbial life, and among their evidence were magnetite crystals with morphologies consistent with biogenic production. The claim was vigorously disputed. Multiple research groups attributed the features to abiotic thermal decomposition, hydrothermal precipitation, or impact-related shock. The majority view today is non-biological. The controversy, however, is what put asteroid magnetite under serious scientific scrutiny. Denis Basilinsky, at the University of Nevada, Las Vegas, one of the world's leading experts on magnetotactic bacteria, and colleagues, examined the Tagish Lake meteorite, the pristine Canadian fall from January 2000. Tagish Lake was collected on ice within days of the fall. Handling was careful, contamination was minimal. Its carbon-rich matrix contains magnetite framboids and chain-like magnetite arrangements. The structures fall within the size and morphological range associated with biogenic production in terrestrial sediments. The standard abiotic explanation holds that aqueous alteration inside asteroids, liquid water reacting with iron-bearing silicates in hydrothermal conditions, can produce magnetite in a variety of forms including chain-like clusters, without any biological input. This explanation is almost certainly correct for most cases. Abiotic magnetite is well documented in terrestrial rocks and can be experimentally synthesized. The chemistry is not controversial. What has no clean answer is why asteroid magnetite falls so precisely within the biogenic size range. 50 to 100 nanometers is not arbitrary for magnetotactic bacteria. At that scale, a magnetite crystal has a single magnetic domain. That is the size at which quantum effects on domain structure favor chain formation and maximize magnetic sensitivity per unit mass. Biology evolved to exploit that size range because the physics rewards it. If abiotic chemistry in an asteroid hydrothermal system converges on the same size range, it is because the same physics applies. The physics of magnetism does not discriminate between biology and chemistry. It pushes toward the same structural solution regardless. The universe knows how to build magnetic chains. Whether anything living is involved turns out to be optional. From structures that mimic life's architecture, we move to the oldest solid objects in existence, formed at the very birth of our solar system, carrying chemical fingerprints from before it began. Number 8. Calcium-aluminum inclusions. At 1:05 in the morning on February 8, 1969, a fireball blazed across the sky over Chihuahua, Mexico. The sonic booms rattled windows across the desert. Fragments fell across a scatter area more than 150 miles long, glowing as they hit the ground. Over the following days, residents and researchers recovered more than 4,400 pounds of dark stone from the desert floor. The meteorite was named Allende, after a nearby village. It arrived by coincidence just weeks before Apollo 11 was scheduled to land on the moon, and NASA asked cosmochemists to use Allende as practice, develop techniques for analyzing extraterrestrial samples before the moon rocks arrived. Inside the Allende fragments, embedded in the dark matrix like pale raisins, were small white blobs. These were calcium-aluminum-rich inclusions, called CAIs. When scientists measured their age, the answer was 4.567 billion years, the oldest known solid objects that formed in our solar system. And their chemistry carries something that should have been erased by the heat of formation but wasn't. CAIs are enriched in calcium, aluminum, titanium, and rare earth elements that share one property: the highest condensation temperatures of any common minerals. They are the first solids to crystallize from a cooling gas of solar composition, which means they formed at the hottest, earliest moment of the solar system's existence, before the asteroids, before the planets, before the Earth. Their age, measured by uranium-lead radiometric dating and hafnium-tungsten geochronology, is now the reference anchor for all solar system chronology. Every other solar system age is measured in relation to CAIs. When a paper says a meteorite formed 2 million years after the beginning of the solar system, it means 2 million years after the Allende CAIs crystallized. What makes CAIs not merely old but chemically anomalous is their oxygen isotope composition. Earth rocks, moon rocks, and Martian meteorites all share a specific range of oxygen isotope ratios that fall on a single line when plotted together, a line defined by normal mass-dependent fractionation. CAIs fall off that line. They show a systematic excess of oxygen-16, the lightest oxygen isotope, that cannot be produced by any process operating inside our solar system. It must have been inherited from the molecular cloud that formed us, and that molecular cloud was chemically heterogeneous. It was a mixture of material from multiple stellar generations, each with slightly different oxygen isotope compositions. CAIs formed at the exact moment this heterogeneous mixture began condensing into our solar system's first solids, before homogenizing heat and mixing erased the diversity. The oxygen anomaly is a snapshot of what the cloud looked like before the solar system was finished building. Gary Huss and colleagues at the University of Hawaii and Arizona State University have shown that CAIs also contain the decay products of aluminum-26, a radioactive isotope with a half-life of only 720,000 years. Aluminum-26 is produced in stellar explosions and in massive star winds. The presence of its decay product, magnesium-26, locked in the CAI crystal lattice means the aluminum-26 was synthesized and injected into our forming solar system within a few 100,000 years of when the CAIs solidified. Another star's nuclear output, another star's timeline. preserved in a blob of white mineral inside a rock that fell in the Mexican desert. The mainstream calls this textbook cosmochemistry. Correct. Established. Taught in graduate seminars. But correct doesn't diminish what you are looking at. The oldest solid objects in our solar system carry an isotopic fingerprint from a star that no longer exists. Their oxygen tells us our molecular cloud was a blend from more than one stellar source, a mixture visible nowhere else in the solar system because everywhere else it was erased. Every atom of calcium in every CAI was made in a stellar furnace billions of years before the sun ignited. These white blobs in a Mexican meteorite are a direct window into the moment our solar system began, and through that window, another world's chemistry is still visible, still measurable, still there. From the oldest solid matter, we move to something even more structurally precise: the building blocks of the genetic code, found in rocks that fell from the sky. Number 9. Nucleobases. In December 2022, a team led by Yasuhiro Oba at Hokkaido University published a paper in Nature Communications. They had spent 2 years analyzing samples returned by the Hayabusa 2 spacecraft from the asteroid Ryugu. Ryugu is a near-Earth asteroid roughly 3,000 feet across, dark as coal, orbiting the Sun between Earth and Mars. Hayabusa 2 landed on Ryugu twice, in 2018 and 2019, touching the surface for seconds each time to collect material. It gathered approximately 0.2 ounces of rock from the surface and subsurface, sealed the samples in a hermetically isolated capsule, and returned them to Japan in December 2020. The samples had never been exposed to Earth's atmosphere. Not for a second. Oba's team analyzed them and found uracil, one of the 4 letters of RNA, found in a rock from space. For the first time in a sample that ruled out every possible source of terrestrial contamination. Nucleobases are the molecules that carry genetic information in DNA and RNA. DNA uses 4: adenine, guanine, cytosine, and thymine. RNA substitutes uracil for thymine. These bases pair with each other in specific ways to store and copy the sequence information that defines every living organism. Without nucleobases, there is no genetic code, no heredity, no mutation, no evolution. Finding uracil in a Ryugu sample is not finding life, but it is finding the alphabet that life uses in a rock that has never been part of any living system, collected from an asteroid that has been in space since before Earth formed. Nucleobases had been identified in carbonaceous chondrites before Ryugu changed the contamination equation. In 2008, Zita Martins at Imperial College London and colleagues published in Earth and Planetary Science Letters reporting adenine, guanine, hypoxanthine, and xanthine in the Murchison meteorite. Their case against terrestrial contamination rested on isotopic ratios. Biologically derived nucleobases from Earth organisms carry carbon and nitrogen isotope signatures consistent with terrestrial biochemistry. The Murchison nucleobases carried isotopic ratios consistent with interstellar chemistry. As a further check, the team analyzed soil samples from the meteorite's fall site in Australia. The soil showed nucleobase concentrations and isotope ratios inconsistent with the meteorite. The nucleobases in Murchison were extraterrestrial. Ryugu made that finding unassailable. The formation mechanism is understood. Laboratory simulations of interstellar ice chemistry, thin films of water, ammonia, methanol, and carbon dioxide ice, exposed to ultraviolet radiation under vacuum, produce nucleobases, including uracil, adenine, and guanine. These conditions exist in molecular clouds and in the outer regions of protoplanetary disks. The chemistry is not exotic. It follows from the same photochemical principles that build amino acids and PAHs in interstellar environments. Nucleobases are a natural output of the universe's carbon chemistry in cold, radiation-bathed space. What remains genuinely unresolved is whether the nucleobases that arrived on early Earth via meteorite contributed to the origin of life, or whether life assembled its own from terrestrial precursors. Both pathways are chemically plausible. Meteoritic delivery brought these molecules during the late heavy bombardment, precisely when life's chemistry was assembling. Wet-dry cycling in volcanic pools could also concentrate nucleoside precursors and drive nucleobase formation without space delivery. The two proposals are not mutually exclusive. Both may have contributed. Neither is ruled out. What cannot be disputed is the discovery itself. Asteroids contain the letters of the genetic code, not as a trace, as a natural, predictable product of interstellar chemistry. The universe assembles adenine and uracil in cold molecular clouds where no life exists, from simple starting molecules under ultraviolet radiation. The same letters, the same molecules, the same chemistry, whether or not anything is there to read them. From the letters, we move to the final piece of life's chemical toolkit, the one element without which no genetic code can function, and which may have arrived on early Earth from the most unexpected direction. Number 10. Schreibersite or phosphorus. Phosphorus is not rare in the universe. It is the 11th most abundant element in the solar system by number of atoms. Yet for decades it was a genuine unsolved problem in origins of life research, because on early Earth, phosphorus was almost entirely locked inside apatite, a calcium phosphate mineral that barely dissolves in water. Life needs phosphorus urgently. The backbone of every DNA and RNA strand is a phosphate chain. ATP, adenosine triphosphate, the molecule that powers every biochemical reaction in every cell on Earth, is built around 3 linked phosphate groups. The membranes surrounding every cell alive today are built from phospholipid molecules, each carrying a phosphate head. Without phosphorus in a chemically reactive, water-soluble form, none of those structures can assemble. Researchers called it the phosphorus problem. Where did life get a usable supply, and how? The answer came from meteorites. In 2005, Matthew Pasick and Dante Loretta at the University of Arizona published a study in astrobiology identifying Schreibersite, an iron-nickel phosphide mineral, as a potential solution. Schreibersite forms almost exclusively inside the metallic cores of asteroids. It requires strongly reducing chemical conditions, no free oxygen. Those conditions no longer exist anywhere on Earth's surface. They are routine inside the metallic interiors of iron-rich asteroid bodies. When those asteroid cores shatter in collisions and their fragments eventually fall on planets, they deliver Schreibersite to a surface where it then encounters water. Unlike apatite, Schreibersite reacts readily with water, releasing orthophosphate and pyrophosphate, 2 forms of phosphorus, directly usable in biochemical reactions without any further processing. No enzyme needed. No biological machinery required. Just Schreibersite in water. Follow-up laboratory experiments confirmed the implications. Schreibersite-derived phosphate reacts spontaneously with nucleosides, the molecular precursors to the building blocks of DNA and RNA, to produce polyphosphate chains under early Earth conditions. These polyphosphate chains are among the most fundamental structures in biochemistry, the form in which cells store and transfer chemical energy. The experiment didn't show that the reaction was theoretically possible. It showed that the reaction happens readily, under conditions that existed on the early Earth, without biological catalysts, in the kinds of warm, shallow pools that early Earth had in abundance. An iron meteorite falls into one of those pools. The Schreibersite dissolves. The phosphate floods the local environment. Nucleosides already present, perhaps delivered by previous meteorite falls, react with the phosphate and begin forming chains. Whether those chains were the origin of life cannot be said with certainty. That they represent the necessary chemistry is not in serious dispute. This is mainstream abiogenesis research, published in major peer-reviewed journals, incorporated into models at NASA and the European Space Agency. The phosphorus problem is not fully closed, but meteoritic delivery of Schreibersite has moved from a speculative proposal to a leading hypothesis, specific enough to be tested and confirmed in controlled laboratory conditions. What that means, combined with everything found in the first 9 items on this list, is a picture that changes the question. Asteroids contain presolar silicon carbide grains from other stars, 7.5 billion years old, predating our Sun by 3 billion years. They contain 96 amino acids assembled in interstellar molecular clouds. They contain Xenon 129, the radioactive decay product of a supernova that may have caused our solar system to form. They contain nanodiamond grains from stellar winds of dying stars. They contain carbon cages full of gas from those same stars. They contain more than 14,000 organic molecular species from the interstellar medium. They contain magnetic crystal chains whose architecture mirrors what bacteria produce. They carry the oldest solid matter in the solar system, stamped with the isotopic fingerprints of a pre-solar molecular cloud. They contain uracil, adenine, guanine, the letters of the genetic code. And they contain Schreibersite, the mineral that may have provided early Earth with the reactive phosphorus that ignited the first self-replicating chemistry. Every one of those things fell from the sky. Every one of them came from somewhere else. The building blocks of life on this planet, its raw materials, its energy carriers, its information molecules, its chemical ignition switch, arrived as deliveries from a universe that was doing chemistry for billions of years before Earth existed to receive any of it. We are not an isolated accident. We are the current address for 10 billion years of cosmic preparation. The asteroids were not empty, they were packed. If that one changed how you think about where we come from, subscribe and come back for the next one. Leave a comment with where you are watching from, and hit like if the universe surprised you tonight.